Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Hello and welcome back to Dark Poutine. I'm Mike Brown, creator and host across the table. As usual, my good friend Matthew.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Matthew. Now, are you getting excited? We're going to CrimeCon in Vegas.
I am.
So we'll be there in Las Vegas with our own table on Podcast Row from April 29th to May 1st. And you can help us by getting your ticket for the event by using code Poutine at checkout. So you go to crimecon.com to get your ticket for the event and use code Poutine, all one word.
Poutime.
That is correct. I'm so excited.
So am I. I asked my supposed boss for time off.
There you go.
And I'm like, because I'm going to be like doing a booth and talking to people about true crime. He's like, oh my God, you're a celebrity. I'm like, no, I'm not. But
yeah. So does he listen to the show?
Occasionally, yeah.
Oh, so you want to call him your supposed boss?
Oh, I call him that all the time.
Okay.
No, it's because I said, hey, we're the same age. And it's a really good relation. We work so well together. If it was a boss employee relationship, I wouldn't like it. I'm like, I'm your partner in making stuff happen. He's like, cool.
Boss light.
Boss light. He's a good boss.
There you go. So yes, again, go to crimecon.com to get your ticket and use Poutine at checkout and come see us in Las Vegas, April 29th to May 1st this year, 2022. Oh my goodness gracious. I can't believe it's 2022 already. Anyway.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense and some listeners may find it disturbing. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some dark poutine.
Served piping hot.
Well, it has to be. Otherwise, the cheese doesn't melt properly.
This is true.
Yeah.
But you don't want the cheese curds totally melted.
No.
They still have to be kind of in the shape of curds.
That's right. And squeaky. They have to squeak on your teeth. Exactly. In this away game, we're off to post-World War I Germany, where in the early 1920s, a brutal serial killer, Fritz Haarmann, killed at least 27 young men and boys. Many of his crimes, it appears, were committed to impress his lover, a man named Hans Grans. Although Haarmann admitted it was he who murdered and dismembered the victims, he claimed that in a few of the cases, it was Grans who chose who was to die. You are listening to Dark Poutine episode 205, Away Game, The Butcher of Hanover, Fritz Haarmann. We'll have a look at the brutal crimes of Fritz Haarmann in the first part of this episode. In the second part, we'll hear from true crime author Alan R. Warren, who's written a book on the case titled Butcher of Hanover. During the interview, Alan will be giving away several copies of his book for a few lucky listeners, so make sure you tune in. At the end of the First World War, Germany, having been defeated, was in transition. In November of 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated as German Emperor and King of Prussia. With the imperial period finished, Germans needed a new means to govern the country. In February of 1919, a new constitution was adopted, ushering in the Weimar Republic, which was then in power until 1933 when Hitler and his Nazis took control of the country. Things were looking up for a time, but soon the economy took a sharp downturn. The country was hemorrhaging money thanks to hyperinflation caused by several factors relating to the end of World War I, including Germany's responsibility to repay war debts and make reparations to other nations. Out of all the change in the nation, the growing dark cloud of resentment also gave birth to a disturbing number of prolific and bloodthirsty German serial killers. These were the days of Peter Kürten, the vampire of Dusseldorf, responsible for numerous sexual assaults and at least 9 murders and another 31 attempted murders. Kürten claimed the sound of spurting and dripping blood excited him sexually, and he was a known blood drinker. Johann Meyer, or Stumpfarm, was a serial killer with 5 known victims, who prior to World War I had lost his arm in a quarry accident, thus his nickname. According to Wikipedia, as a murder weapon, Meyer used a carbine, and in later interrogations he described the crimes with a shot, a scream, all over. To disguise his actions, he separated the heads and limbs of his male victims and exchanged them. Karl Grossman, active between 1918 and 1921, murdered at least 26 women and girls and was suspected of as many as 100 murders. Grossman sold meat cut from his victims on the black market and may have sold some to unsuspecting customers from his hot dog stand at a train station near his home. In crimes committed between 1918 and 1920, Friedrich Schumann, aka the Terror of Falkenhagen Lake, a World War veteran, marksman, and Iron Cross recipient, committed 7 murders, 15 attempted murders, 5 arsons, 11 rapes, and a series of thefts and robberies. Also active at the time was the Sandman, Adolf Seefeld. Seefeld was a traveling watchmaker who poisoned and then sexually assaulted young boys in their sleep, killing at least a dozen. Although the exact date is disputed due to a lack of paperwork from the time, it is believed that Fritz Haarmann was born on October 25, 1879, to Ollie and Joanna Haarmann. The marriage between Ollie and Joanna was fraught with tension. Ollie was unfaithful, eventually acquiring the syphilis that would one day kill him.
Did you know that syphilis was not effectively treated until 1943?
Oh my goodness.
I know. Until then, you essentially, if you got syphilis, you went insane and died.
Well, there's actually a lot more to it. If you Google the effects of untreated syphilis, you'll see that there are some horrific things that happen to your body and your brain.
Can you imagine living in a time when we didn't have the medications we have now?
I can't imagine it.
I mean, I wonder if these anti-vaxxers who get syphilis refuse treatment.
Something tells me that's not the case.
I bet when their private bits are at stake, they don't worry about having Wi-Fi or 5G in their penis.
Yeah, well, that might help. I don't know. To distract herself from her terrible marriage, Johanna doted on Fritz, the youngest of the 6 Haarmann children, in an unhealthy way. Fritz's mother spoiled him, keeping him to herself, confining Fritz to her bedroom for most of the first 7 years of his life. From Alan R. Warren's Butcher of Hanover, quote, "She dressed him in his older sister's previous worn clothing and gave him their dolls to play with. As he got older, she started to apply light makeup on his face and put ribbons in his hair. Fritz was growing up like a little girl, unaware of any boys' activities back in those days. Johanna also kept Fritz separate from his older brothers, who were very jealous of him, as he seemed to be her favorite child, and she ignored them."
That's a super unhealthy way to raise a kid, especially in the young formative years.
Yeah, and I'm not leaning toward playing with dolls is an unhealthy thing or dressing up in a different gender. It's when it's enforced. That's the problem.
Exactly. What I mean by that is, the locking away, like in her room, keeping away from everybody else, and sort of this enforced thing. Kids need to discover sort of the world in their own interests. And if you completely shelter and then force one thing on them, it's not healthy, right?
Right, yeah.
It reminds me of the time at Christmas that I begged my mom for an Easy Bake Oven, or EZ Bake Oven as we call them here.
EZ.
Which she got me, and my father didn't know she bought it. And when I opened it at Christmas morning, I can remember him scoffing and like asking why she bought it for me. But I didn't care because I loved baking cakes with that little light bulb.
Yeah.
And my brother actually once said, I knew you were gay when you got the Easy Bake Oven for Christmas. But then, he didn't say no when I offered him these fabulous cakes I made.
Fabulous cakes. Did you decorate the cakes?
Of course I did.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And at the same time, though, Mike, right? Like, I love my Tonka truck and my toy race cars as much as I love my Easy Bake Oven. So my point is, like, just let kids be kids. They'll find their way.
When Fritz went to school at 7, the other children found his propensity for playing with dolls bizarre. He was bullied and beaten by his classmates. As well, at 8 years old, he was molested by a teacher. As Fritz grew, however, he became stronger and more willing and able to defend himself physically from the relentless assaults of his schoolmates. Fritz left school at 15 to work at his father's cigar store, but left after a year due to a falling out. He then entered a military academy. After only a few months and several fainting episodes, Fritz was diagnosed with, quote, anxiety neurosis and subsequently left the academy, returning to work with his father. Soon after that came the first time Fritz was arrested for the sexual assault of a young boy. For the next year, he continued assaulting young men and boys after luring them away from public places using different ruses. Caught numerous times for these sexual assaults, Haarmann was deemed incurable and unfit to stand trial by the psychiatrist Dr. Gert Schumalfuls. Haarmann was sent to Hildesheim Mental Institute for an indefinite period. Less than a year later, Fritz's mother aided in his escape from the institution, and Haarmann absconded to Switzerland for a time, determined to straighten out his life and to stop his deviant behavior. In Switzerland, Fritz met Erna Loert, who became pregnant with Fritz's child, and the couple were engaged. All was the mama's boy, though. Fritz and Erna moved back to Hanover, Germany in 1899 so he could be closer to Joanna. From Alan R. Warren's Butcher of Hanover, quote, it's hard to say why. Perhaps a lack of good record-keeping within the military administration. But when mandatory conscription began in the year 1900, Fritz received a letter that ordered him to serve his compulsory time. Either they didn't realize that Fritz had not only been discharged from the military for incurable mental illness, but he had also escaped a mental institute. Or perhaps they didn't care and wanted or needed every able man to be ready for war.
I think the latter is probably the case. The war, it was a meat grinder, and I think they needed to throw everything they had at it.
Yeah, and it was humans. They were just throwing humans at it.
Of course.
Human bodies, live human bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this person willing? Everybody was disposable
Just
at that
chuck
point.
them in, yeah.
For the first year after his conscription, things seemed to be looking up, but after Joanna's death in 1901, Fritz spiraled downward into a maudlin depression. In 1902, after having dizzy spells and more episodes of fainting, Fritz was sent home to Hanover. Fritz, feeling he was entitled to more than he was, fought constantly with his father and Irma about money. The feud with Ollie boiled over into a violent physical altercation that ultimately led to their permanent estrangement. Fritz's relationship with Erna, whom he'd not yet married, also came to an end after months of fighting caused by Fritz's belief that she was having an affair. He moved into his own apartment and over the next decade made ends meet through a few odd jobs, but mostly through theft and fraud, for which he was arrested and jailed several times for those crimes, as well as several assaults. He'd also been suspected of robbing graves for the valuables buried with the dead there. Despite the seriousness of the other crimes he had been involved in, it was fraud that got him his longest stay behind bars. In 1913, Haarmann was sentenced to 5 years in jail. He spent the entire First World War in prison, sometimes on work release during the day, as there were labor shortages in Germany as all the free young men had gone off to fight in the trenches. After his release from prison, Haarmann returned to his criminal ways. Always a sly and quick thinker, after one arrest, Fritz cozied up to the police, claiming he could lead them to bigger criminals in the area by working on the inside. The police became dependent on him for information, and this kept him out of prison for a time. They even issued him a police identification card at his insistence. Haarmann believed the police trust in him made him powerful, and he used that edge to rat out competitors, always to his own criminal advantage. The ID card came in handy too for what he had in mind. Fritz eventually took control of the nefarious goings-on at the Hanover train station, a hotbed of criminal activity and his initial hunting ground. He was an odd character, in manner and appearance, according to an article by Alexander Gilbert. Quote, Haarmann's body was strong and coarse. It was also slightly feminine, and his speech was like the querulous voice of an old woman. The killer's almost constant defensiveness and embarrassment was reflected in his automatisms and stereotypes, the wiggling of his behind, the licking of his lips, even the constant blinking of his eyes. Haarmann loved, quote, feminine, unquote, pastimes, such as baking and cooking, but would smoke strong cigars at the same time.
This is a very bad man.
Yes.
So I'm not defending him in the least, but I laugh about the concern over his masculinity or femininity and his pastimes.
Yes.
It's like an absolute obsession. And I know you're not obsessed with it.
No.
But what you're doing, like your research obviously showed that everyone wrote about this, right?
Right. But this is why I'm including this story as something we can discuss for its problematic nature.
Like all these people were like so like concerned about this stuff, and it has nothing to do with the fact that he's a sick serial killer, right?
Right.
So imagine imagine calling baking or cooking like a feminine pastime to like Gordon Ramsay or Heston Blumenthal. You'd get a bundt cake across the head.
Right.
Right. Or the flip side of that, you look at RuPaul, right? Who slays it, but is not a slayer. It has nothing to do with it. A sick bastard is a sick bastard if he's in a dress or a pair of overalls. It doesn't matter.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
It was at the train station that Haarmann began showing his police ID card to potential victims, attractive young men and boys, whom Haarmann knew would not have the correct paperwork to travel. He would arrest his target, taking him back to his residence with promises of food, a place to stay, and or a job of some kind. Haarmann's true motive was sexual assault once he had the victim alone. The first solo murder attributed to Haarmann on record came in September of 1918. Fritz met 17-year-old Friedel Roth at the train station with another man. He paid the two of them to have sex with him in a nearby park. In the weeks following, Fritz began bringing Roth alone back to his single-room apartment at 27 Sellerstrasse, giving Roth money or food as payment for sex. One evening, Fritz made a romantic, sexual advance toward Roth, but was rebuffed by the teen. Friedel claimed he was not homosexual, and as there was no money offered, he was not otherwise interested in Fritz sexually. This sent Fritz Haarmann into a violent frenzy. He brutally raped the boy. According to Alan R. Warren's Butcher of Hanover, during the attack, Fritz bit viciously into Roth's neck, ripping out part of Friedel's Adam's apple. Quote, Roth slowly suffocated and died on the floor while Haarmann continued raping him, end quote. It was much later when this incident involving the horrific biting of Friedel Roth's neck that gave Haarmann another nickname, the Vampire of Hanover. Roth's family and friends were worried about him after he failed to return home. As Friedel had been seen in the company of their informant, Fritz Haarmann, many times in the days leading up to his disappearance, police had no choice but to enter Haarmann's apartment looking for evidence of the boy. There was no sign of Friedel Roth, but there was another, younger boy, only 13, and almost nude in the apartment with Haarmann. Haarmann was arrested, but for the next year somehow avoided jail for the assault on the 13-year-old found in his apartment. In late 1919, Fritz met a good-looking 18-year-old petty thief and armed robber named Hans Grans. It was Grans who first approached Haarmann, offering himself up for sex with the creepy 30-year-old. Haarmann was smitten, and Grans moved into Fritz's apartment. Haarmann used Grans for sex, and Hans used Fritz for money and shelter. Interestingly, throughout their time together, Fritz allowed Hans to have girlfriends, as Grans claimed he was not homosexual and only having sex with Fritz for cash and a roof over his head. One can't help but think about the more contemporary example of the relationships between Joe Exotic, the Tiger King, and his boy toys when learning about Grans and Haarmann's arrangement.
Oh, the good old gay for pay excuse.
Yeah, and we get into that a little bit in Alan
do you?
Warren's interview. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it's just, come on.
Yeah.
If you can get it up here a little bit gay.
Okay. Interesting.
Think about it.
Yeah.
If you don't like it at all, pay or not, you're not going to be able to perform.
Fair enough. I don't know. I've never
Gay for paid?
I haven't. But I mean, should
Let's just stop there.
Yeah, let's stop right there. Let's not go any further into that. I'm comfortable with it. Like, I can have the discussion. I don't mind. However, I don't think it's necessary.
No.
In March of 1920, Haarmann finally began serving the 9 months he'd been sentenced to for the assault on the younger boy. While Fritz was in jail, Hans made ends meet thieving and selling his loot on the local black market. By Christmas 1920, Haarmann was out. He and Grans spent the next 2 years stealing and living off the proceeds of regular government payments made to Haarmann, who was declared unfit to work due to his mental condition. They mostly stole and sold laundry and meat, giving many unsellable items of clothing to needy folks around Hanover. They were seen as nice guys. It was in February of 1923 that Haarmann committed his next murder, that of a 17-year-old pianist named Fritz Frank. According to Alan R. Warren's book, Frank played piano for money or food wherever he could, often taking the train from town to town looking for work. On February 12, 1923, Haarmann approached Frank at the train station, telling the boy he was a police officer offering some work back at Haarmann's apartment. While Grans was out with one of his girlfriends, Haarmann raped and murdered the boy, later giving the youngster's clothes and some of his possessions to Grans. Friends thought that Frank, a troubled young man, had disappeared in Hamburg, where he'd been planning to go and look for work, embarrassed to come home as he'd stolen some items from his family before he'd left. This murder set off a spree, leaving at least another 26 men and boys dead over the next year and a bit. Apart from one 22-year-old man, the bulk of the rest of Haarmann's victims were all in their teens. One was just 10 years old. Here's a list of the first victims. An apprentice writer, Wilhelm Schultz, 17, disappeared on March 20th, 1923. 15-year-old student, Roland Hutch, vanished from Hanover railway station on May 23, 1923. Hans Sonnenfeld, an 18-year-old runaway from the town of Limmer, disappeared sometime in May 1923. Ernst Ehrenberg, 13, disappeared whilst running an errand for his parents on June 25, 1923. 18-year-old Heinrich Strauss vanished on August 24, 1923. After Haarmann's 1924 arrest, Strauss's violin case was found among Haarmann's possessions. Paul Broniszewski, 17, disappeared on September 24, 1923, while on his way to visit his uncle. 17-year-old Richard Groff vanished on September 23rd. He'd told his friends he was going to meet a detective from Hanover who had a job for him. Wilhelm Erdner, 16, vanished on October 12, 1923 from Hanover train station. Later investigation uncovered the fact that soon after the boy's disappearance, Haarmann sold Wilhelm Erdner's bicycle to someone else. Hermann Wolf, 16, disappeared on October 24, 1923. Haarmann had given some of Wolf's clothing to Grans and other people he knew. On October 27, 1923, Heinz Brinkmann, 13, vanished from Hanover Station after missing his train home to Clausthal. Apprentice Adolf Hannapel, 15, was seen being approached by Haarmann on the day of his disappearance on November 11, 1923. Investigators questioned Haarmann, who denied any knowledge of what had happened to the boy. After his eventual arrest, Haarmann admitted to having killed the boy at Grans' request. Hans had liked the boy's clothing and wanted them for himself. Haarmann was happy to oblige. Adolf Hennies, 19, disappeared on December 6, 1923, while in Hanover looking for work. Ernst Spieker, was 17 when he disappeared on January 5th, 1924. He'd been on his way to court where he was to be a witness at a trial. Heinrich Koch, 18, a known acquaintance of Fritz Haarmann, vanished on January 15, 1924. Willie Singer was 19 when he disappeared on February 2, 1924. His clothing was later found in Haarmann's apartment. Herman Spiekert, a 15-year-old electrical apprentice, vanished on February 8, 1924. Alfred Hogreff, 16, was an apprentice mechanic. He disappeared on April 6, 1924. His clothes were later traced to Haarmann. Herman Bach, the oldest of Haarmann's victims, 22, disappeared in April 1924. Bach was last seen by his friends walking towards Haarmann's apartment. Haarmann again denied knowing anything about the missing man. Wilhelm Appel, 15, disappeared while on his way to work on April 17, 1924. Robert Witzel was 18 years old when he vanished on April 26, 1924. Haarmann later admitted to dumping Witzel's remains in the river Lane. Heinz Martin, a 14-year-old apprentice locksmith, disappeared from Hanover Station on May 9, 1924. Over these initial months of Haarmann's brutal serial killing spree, the people of Hanover felt as though they were under siege. As with many of the other known sex offenders in the area, and his connections to a few of the victims, of course, Haarmann was definitely a person of interest in the disappearances. The 26 victims of Haarmann's were essentially lost among the 600 young men and boys who disappeared around Hanover in the past year. The pressure, however, mounted when the first discoveries were made. It quickly became clear that these people may not have simply run away. More than a few of them had been murdered. From an article on Haarmann by Alexander Gilbert, quote, "On 17th May 1924, some children playing at the edge of a river near the Herrhausen Castle found a human skull, and on May 29th another washed up on the riverbank. The town was sent into a frenzy on the 13th June, when 2 more skulls were found included in the river's sediment. An autopsy proved the first 2 crania to be that of young people aged between 18 and 20, and the last skull found from a boy of approximately 12. In all cases, a sharp instrument had been used to separate the skulls from their torso, and the flesh had been entirely removed. It was initially thought that the human remains originated from the Anatomical Institute in Göttingen, or that they had been flung into the river by grave robbers fleeing from capture. Yet these theories remained unproven, and the mystery gained further publicity when boys playing on marshland unearthed a sack containing human bones." End quote. The disappearances continued, and one name kept coming up after each one of them: Fritz Haarmann. 17-year-old Fritz Wittig, a traveling salesman from the town of Kassel, disappeared on May 26, 1924. Again, after his arrest, Haarmann insisted Grans ordered him to commit this murder and to obtain the boy's good new suit and possessions for Hans. Friedrich Ebeling was only 10 years old and Haarmann's youngest victim. He also disappeared on May 26, 1924, while skipping school. Heinrich Koch was 16 on his way to college on June 5, 1924, when he vanished. Koch was last seen in the company of none other than Fritz Haarmann. Haarmann's final victim was 17-year-old Erich de Vries. The fateful meeting happened at Haarmann's favorite haunt, Hanover Station, from which he lured the boy away to his rape and murder on June 14, 1924. Police decided to have a couple of younger officers come in from Berlin to go undercover at the Hanover train station in an effort to get more information on cagey Fritz Haarmann and hopefully catch the suspected killer before he struck again. The sting included the good-looking young officers pretending to be new in Hanover and in need of a place to stay. But after Haarmann was found in the company of a 15-year-old boy who told authorities Haarmann had been pressuring him for sex, Haarmann was arrested. His home was searched, and that search uncovered hundreds of personal items and clothing belonging to some of the missing men and boys. After his capture, Haarmann maintained his innocence for a full 7 days, but eventually confessed to murder, including his first. He said that after raping and killing the teen in 1918, Friedel Roth's head was stuffed behind the stove and wrapped in a newspaper. His body had been disposed of by way of burial in nearby Stockner Cemetery. After that, the dam broke, and there was a flood of murder confessions pouring out of Haarmann. According to Gilbert, Haarmann was, quote, always with a view to his commercial interests. The body would then be dismembered, and the clothes and meat sold through the usual channels for smuggled goods. The useless portions were thrown into the River Lane. That's right. He was selling the meat of his victims to unsuspecting buyers.
That's so disgusting.
Yeah.
But, during times of food crisis, this stuff happens way more than we care to admit.
Right.
If you have a strong stomach, dear listeners, Google Russian peasants sell body parts. You'll find articles and images of people trying to survive in the 1920s when there was the famine, self-made famine,
right?
By selling human flesh in essentially out in the open market stall tables.
Wow.
And still looking, Google it if you want to, but honestly, it's really, really horrible. It's not like, oh, it's a piece of meat that I can't recognize. No, it's like a child's body. It's disgusting.
I don't think that the people who were buying Haarmann's meat, though, were aware of what was going on,
they
serving
just wanted
out.
Cheap meat, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's so gross.
Yeah, it is really, really disgusting. In his case, I think it was just body disposal. It was like, I'm disposing...
And
making some cash. Exactly. Kind of like Burke and Hare selling bodies to...
Burke and Hare, is that like Birkenstocks?
No. Burke and Hare sold...
I know who they
are. Yeah, okay. Anyway. But for those who don't know, look up our Burke and Hare episode.
Burke and Hare?
Because I covered it. Fritz took police from dump site to dump site, making his admissions as he went, giving a gruesome play-by-play of each victim. The word got out about the murders, and the horrific details of human meat being sold on the black market made people in Hanover sick to their stomachs. According to Alexander Gilbert's article, quote, police were shown parts of corpses hidden in bushes, bones dredged from a lake, and skeletons concealed around the city. Inevitably, more and more people stepped forward who had obtained clothing or meat from either Haarmann or Grans, and the evidence snowballed. Hans Grans was arrested and charged with 2 counts of inciting murder after being implicated by Haarmann in the confessions. At his 2-week trial, Haarmann defended himself, refusing assistance from an experienced attorney. He spun quite a tale, and his behavior was both bizarre and theatrical. He took the stand himself, giving extremely graphic details of the commission of his crimes, claiming he could not control himself. From Gilbert's article, quote, I never intended to hurt those youngsters, but I knew that if I got going, something would happen, and that made me cry. I would throw myself on top of those boys and bite through the Adam's apple, throttling them at the same time. Haarmann explained the guilt he often felt at this point, regularly collapsing on the dead body and covering the face with a cloth so, quote, it wouldn't be looking at me, end quote. Gilbert's article goes on to describe what exactly Haarmann did next in disposing of the bodies. After recounting his methods of dismemberment, he said, quote, it would take me 5 or 6 trips to take everything and throw it down the toilet or into the river. I always hated doing this, but I couldn't help it. My passion was so much stronger than the horror of cutting and chopping, end quote. On December 19, 1924, Haarmann was found guilty of 24 counts of murder, receiving 24 death sentences in the 27 cases he was charged with. After his sentencing, Haarmann said, quote, I want to be executed on the marketplace. On the tombstone must be put this inscription. Here lies mass murderer Haarmann. That's not what he got. He was beheaded with a guillotine on April 25, 1925. His head was kept for study at a local university. From CrimeLibrary.com, Grans was initially found guilty of enticement to murder in the case of Adolf Hannapel. Witnesses had seen Grans in the company of Haarmann, pointing to Hannapel. Haarmann claimed this was one of 2 murders committed upon the insistence of Grans for this reason. Grans was sentenced to death. The discovery of a letter from Haarmann declaring Grans' innocence later led to a second trial and a 12-year prison sentence for Grans. After serving his time, Grans continued to live in Hanover until his death around 1980. End quote. Unable to determine who was who, DNA identification was decades off, Haarmann's victims were buried in a communal grave and a monument was erected. According to CrimeLibrary.com, quote, Haarmann became known as the Butcher of Hanover. The classic film M, released in 1931, directed by Fritz Lang and starring Peter Lorre, was inspired by Haarmann's crimes, as well as those of Dusseldorf child killer Peter Kürten. Haarmann is mentioned by name in the film, along with another well-known German serial killer, Karl Grossman. And we will take a break right here. And we're back. Matthew, what are your thoughts?
Oh, this is one of the grossest episodes ever.
It is not
it's just
easy.
The number of victims, what was done to them, and the whole selling the meat.
Yeah.
And you just think, like, all these people, they're all young men and boys. What could they have grown up to be, right? It's hard when you do these ones. You just keep listing and listing and listing all these victims, right?
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the show and my comfort with doing that.
Okay. Well, you don't want to skip over them.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And we'll talk about it some more. Next, let's take a listen to the interview I did this week with my friend, true crime author and writer of the book Butcher of Hanover, Fritz Haarmann, book 2 of his Killer Queen series, Alan R. Warren. Alan has written several best-selling true crime books and has been one of the hosts and producers of the popular NBC News Talk radio show House of Mystery, which reviews true crime, history, science, religion, and paranormal mysteries that we live every day from a darker, comedic, and logical perspective. He has interviewed guests such as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., F. Lee Bailey, Aphrodite Jones, Marcia Clark, Nancy Grace, Dan Abrams, and Jesse Ventura. The show is based in Seattle on KKNW 1150 AM and syndicated on the NBC network throughout the United States, including KCAA 106.5 FM in Los Angeles. Welcome, Alan. I've been meaning to have you on the show for a long time, so I'm really glad that I could finally convince you to join us.
Well, it convinced me. I'm always willing to be on the show. Come on.
I know. I don't want to make it sound like you're aloof or...
Well, I'm a celebrity.
Are you?
To my dogs think I'm a celebrity.
There you go. Now, in this episode of Dark Patina, I'm covering Fritz Haarmann and his lover, Hans Grans. What is it that attracted you to their story?
That one, again, that was the initial story that I caught on to. I think I was surprised about how much of a killer he really was and how many people he probably did murder. Mm-hmm. And it was so massive. And I think I was just shocked about how someone could get away with that many murders for that long. And also that it happened in Germany. It was just really interesting to me.
Yeah, it happened in Germany in post-World War I. And Haarmann and Grans were lovers. So what was it like for homosexual people in Germany in that era?
Actually, it was surprising. It was quite good. At that time, after World War I, there was a big increase in the homosexual actually advancing into a community. There was a lab, a science group that had formed, and they were studying sexuality, kind of like the Kinsey sort of thing. And they were very pro-homosexual and transsexual. And in fact, they had completed an operation from a man into a woman. Mm-hmm. And they had convinced the government to give passes out. So people that were men that were dressing like females, and there was the whole sexual aspect of it was kind of made legal in a sense, because he could give passes to any of these people that needed it. And so the cops would not be allowed to arrest anybody just because they were homosexual or transsexual. So that changed the feeling about gay people.
You did mention in your book that sodomy was still a crime at the time?
Yeah, federally it was still an illegal thing, but they had two things. They had that science group that convinced the government to let people go without being arrested by police. And the other thing was the emperor of the largest state in Germany had it was a scandal. There were 6 or 7 of his closest aides that were all homosexual. And this sort of became popular. So he was not anti-gay, so to speak. So when your king is pro-gay and the police aren't arresting you, there was a freedom that came, especially in the large cities. So you look at Berlin. Berlin became the capital of gay culture. There was clubs and cabarets and shows and theater, and everybody that had any kind of wealth or name all had to go and watch the gay burlesque sort of thing. That whole era in the 1920s was fascinating. It was very much like the 1990s in America, which is kind of crazy.
This is a well-known crime this is a well-known crime at the time, but it's essentially gone away in the public consciousness. Like, although Haarmann's crimes are just as horrific, what do you think gives stories like H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper more staying power? Jack the Ripper might be a bad example because, that case is unsolved. But why isn't this case and many others like it historically, why aren't they more popular? Why don't people talk about them as much?
Well, it's just the transfer into English. Most of Haarmann, if you're in Germany or Austria, everybody knows Haarmann. Everybody knows the butcher or the vampire of Hanover. That's a very popular thing in mainland Europe. But because there's never really been a translation of any of the books or movies or shows that they've come across, they've done about this case, has never been made in English. So when you get into Jack the Ripper and you get into H.H. Holmes, there's so much American media that's covered it, and there's tons of programs and people talking about them in English running in America. I don't know why no one in America or even the UK has jumped on this case, because it's a fascinating case. And I think it would be something they could make great TV shows and movies about, but it just hasn't been done.
Like you mentioned, that it's a massive case and there's a huge number of people. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, 27 at least young men and boys that this guy killed.
Yeah, he said at different times throughout this whole trial period of time, anywhere from 100 to 150. He's thrown out all sorts of numbers of how many people he's killed. And there were plenty of bones and remains that they never did identify. So who knows what the number is?
Wow. I'm really fascinated by these historical cases, and a lot of true crime seems to cover only contemporary crime. What are some challenges that you have when writing about stories that are from days of yore, gone by?
Well, the biggest thing, of course, is there's no witnesses. There's no live testimony. There's nobody to talk to. There's no prosecutor. There's no direct information. So you have to go back into the old newspapers. And the biggest challenge is finding newspapers that cover that time period, and finding them, especially with COVID, digitally. Mm-hmm. And so you join a lot of groups, you get a lot of papers. You see, because you can't just go with one paper. You can go with Chicago's newspaper. You can go with New York. You got to go with, in Germany, you got to go with Hanover, and then you got to go to Berlin. You take all of these cities. And then when you do find them, with the Hanover case, it was all in German. So you have to translate everything. And wow. You see, the newspapers back then, if you ever looked at old papers and covering a case from the 1920s, even in America, there might be a paper and you get the headline for that day and it covers your case. But when you go to look through the paper, they got pieces of the article scattered everywhere. There was no rhyme or reason. So you have to go through every single page in every day during the whole time of the crime in order to get it. So it takes a lot of time.
I find that too. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's unbelievable, because then when you're doing it with German, so not only that, you're translating every single article on every page of every day during the, say, 2-year period from several cities. The translation took forever. And even when she translated from German into English, a lot of it doesn't make sense, because not only was it 1920s, it's Germany. So they have different expressions. I want a good egg, the guy goes. Well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
They have different expressions. And when you translate it right into English, it makes no sense. So then you have to talk to someone who's German to try and help you understand what they're trying to get at in some of the things, so that's the biggest challenge.
I mean, those are challenges that I see too. And a lot of these cases that are lost to time, I found that some of the facts are lost to time too. Like different newspapers will have different stories that contradict each other fact-wise.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, you have to sort through that too. It's insane.
Well, it's insane in the sense that they'll say different things about the same date, but it'll be a totally different story.
Mm-hmm.
They can tell you different facts. They could say, well, it was a 14-year-old boy and it was a 16-year-old. The next paper said it was 15.
Yeah.
It's really strange how that goes. That's sort of why you got to go with more than one.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go with as many copies of these papers as you can get.
Butcher of Hanover is book 2 of your Killer Queens series. You started the series with Leopold and Loeb, the story of Nathan Leopold Jr. and Richard Loeb, 2 wealthy University of Chicago students who in May of 1924 kidnapped and murdered 14-year-old Bobby Franks. That's a fascinating case too. What is it that you're exploring with this series?
I think the biggest point to this is that you look at murder by, let's say, gay people. It's not any different than the straight community. It doesn't need to be shown as different.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Leopold and Loeb as being as a couple that would go out and murder someone. Back in the 20s, unfortunately, people thought homosexuals were sick and they should be put in jail. And it was homosexuality needed to be something that was cured. It's a sickness, it's an illness, it's something really evil, it's bad. So homosexuality was compared to murder and all these bad crimes. It was just put up there. So if you were a homosexual, you were evil, disgusting, period. So you were thrown in with all that. So what happened was with murders in that case, you were ultimate evil. Not only were you a murderer, but you're a homosexual. Oh my God. So they were just thought of as the lowest of low. And what I'm hoping to do is to show that they were just 2 guys that happened to like to be with guys that wanted to murder. Their sexuality had nothing to do with the actual murder itself. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that was a perfect case because those guys didn't go after gay men. They weren't trying to kill someone that they wanted to have sex with. They weren't trying to kill their father or their mother. There was none of that. They didn't care who they were going to kill. The sexuality, in essence, directly had nothing to do with the victim.
Yeah, theirs was a murder for money, right? Like kidnapping.
Sort of. The reality was the one guy loved committing crimes. He loved to do things. He got a thrill out of it. It turned him on sexually to commit a crime, whether it be burn a place, steal money, or kill someone. The more of the thrill he got of it was because the higher, the more violent the crime was. Whereas the other partner, Leopold, was not about that. He was about sex, period. He liked to manipulate Loeb into these criminal situations because they would have really good sex. And the more intense the situation, the better the sex. So when they go out and rob someone in a park, it would be good. When they go burn something down, it would be better. They go kill someone, it was totally intense. It was the best sex ever. So in Leopold's mind, it was about getting Loeb charged, getting him aroused. In Loeb's mind, he would relive these crimes in his mind, and it would just be the ultimate rush. See, so this was a mental illness, but it wasn't about, like, I'm trying to say, well, we can't, the old blame was because they were homosexuals, they were killing. That's not the case. They were killing because they had mental illness. There was an issue.
Mm-hmm. They had some sort of paraphilia.
Yeah.
Violent acts turned them on.
And I'm trying to compare it to straight couples.
Mm-hmm.
There's killer couples, Bernardo, and there's tons of these couples that have committed killings and crimes as a couple, thrill killers, they call it. But it isn't because they were straight and having sex. You know what I mean? I'm trying to make that focus that, look, it really makes no difference.
Haarmann and Grans are essentially doing the same thing that Leopold and Loeb were doing.
In a sense, they had a different kind of idea. Haarmann was much older, not as attractive. Grans was very young, sexy, and Haarmann loved him, overly loved him, and would do anything for him. Grans took advantage of that and would come to the point where they would be at a rail station. They'll see a young guy. He's wearing a really nice suit. Grans would say, "Oh, I want that. I want that." They would take the guy home in offer of a meal or job or something. And of course they would kill him. And, Haarmann would take apart the body, dispose of it, take the clothing and give it to Grans. So the idea was he was killing for Grans's needs. And, and it wasn't about sexuality in the sense that Grans still had girlfriends. In fact, he had a regular girlfriend that he lived with at the time. And he, right to the end, said that he never was gay. He was just selling his body to achieve money and items. It didn't matter to him.
Gay for pay, right?
Well, yeah, and this goes on today. That's not an unusual trait. And back then, that's how he met Haarmann, was he was selling himself on the street.
So will there be any more Killer Queens books? Is this the end of the series?
I'm not sure. I've got a third one that I worked on, and it's covering the Grinder serial killer out of the UK, Stephen Port, only because I did a short book on it before, and I have a lot of information, and it kind of fits in with this. I think the whole series is kind of showing how society responds to murders around the gay community and how it affects the case so much. In both those cases that we talked about, they had such a different response in the communities, and so much of the way people feel about gays sort of made how that case ended up and how it was treated. And I think the Grinder is another one. It's more modern times, but it's still going on. The police didn't even look after it or look into the cases until there were already 5 murdered, because in their mind, they were finding dead gay men in the park in London, and they just thought, well, they're just drug addict homosexuals, who cares? And so they just put it down to it's just another homo overdosing.
It's like the MacArthur murders here in Canada, gay men going missing and people not looking for them because they're gay men who went missing. Typically gay men of color in that case.
Yeah, and there's this, and it's not really society. Society has a better opinion, but it's just there's a lot of people in the policing at this particular time, and certainly in London, that particular case, that were just kind of, just another one. They didn't care. And it wasn't until a lot of pressure was put on them about the 5th murder that they actually had to, because it got to the media and the press and all over the TV. They felt an obligation to go in and find out. And then they found out there was a lot more. There was a serial killer going on. It shouldn't be that way. And I'm not, by all means, I'm not making any statement against the police or any statement against anybody. What it is it's just kind of, I go to the bare bone facts and go, this is what happened. This is how long it took. This is it. And it's kind of, I'm trying to look at the whole societal impression of homosexuals and how they will treat them in cases of crime, such as murder, and how much it affects the outcome.
We saw that in the Versace murder as well with the spree killer Andrew Cunanan.
Right.
That whole case had those similar aspects that you're talking about. I just rewatched the dramatization of that the other day, and it's really fascinating how that story about homosexuality is sort of prevalent in the narrative of that case. Like, you can't separate it.
No, you can't, but people will try because it's hard. It's just fascinating to watch how people are treated when sexuality is brought into the case, and it becomes salacious. So
Right.
and that's kind of how people, they sell it and they market it and they talk about it, but these are real people here. This is real. It affects real people's lives. Cunanan is a perfect example of someone that's, he was going through his own personal illness, mental illness and challenges, and how much it affects it. But people just look at it as, oh, it's a gay murder. Oh my God.
Right.
And it's just, and it becomes all that. And it's not a real story. We need to go beyond that salacious tidbit that gets sold and kind of go into the story and look at real mental illness and real issues, and how much, even now, like with the trans murders going on, there's so much happening, and how as a society we'll dismiss it just because we don't really like who they are or how they live, and go, oh, well, they're less than. And it's kind of a ridiculous thing, but it kind of shows you. So I think Grindr will be the next one, because I have a lot of the letters by him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that's really interesting. So
you've written a lot of true crime. What is it that brought you to true crime as a genre?
that was completely accidental. It was because I was doing a true crime podcast at the time.
Okay.
And because I was doing that, I was interested, and actually a few true crime writers and publishers asked me to do a few small articles. And so I did that, and one thing led to another, and then R.J. Parker approached me about doing the Russell Williams story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it started. That was the very first thing I actually wrote. And actually the second thing, that's a different story, but I wrote 2 books for him, but Russell Williams was the one that was first published, and that's kind of how it went, and it just took off from there.
You've written a lot of books, and I've quoted from a few of them, and the first one I think was the vampire rapist book about Mr. Bowden, and that's when you and I connected, was after that episode.
See, that was the very first book I wrote, but it wasn't good enough to be put out. And so we went to the Russell Williams, because I had a 4-book deal with them, and they were the first 2. But so I had to rewrite that book. But that was a really good, I like that story better. But
yeah, it's a really interesting story. It's quite creepy, and the fact that it happened in Canada is like, what the heck?
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a lot more crime going on in Canada than I think people realize, like violent crimes like that. We don't get enough of it in the media, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that, I think, is a big portion of it is there are publication bans around some cases.
Oh, I think that's the primary reason. And in a way, I think it's good, too, because I do think we have a much nicer society than, let's say, America. And a lot of it is to do with how much of that is brought to our entertainment.
Do you have a favorite among the books that you've written? And if so, why?
Oh, no. A personal favorite, no. I have a writer's favorite because I think as you write more books, every time you do one, there comes to a point where sometimes you write something and you go, wow, this is actually the best thing I've done. Mm-hmm. Not that it's any more of a favorite. It's just from a writer's point of view, I can look at it and go, wow, I'm much prouder of this than anything I've done before, because it's come out better, and plus people receive it better, people that are in the business or people that write or people that do things, and they go, yeah, it makes you feel really good. And plus people that are involved in the crime, sometimes they are a part of it, and so it makes you feel good. And so I feel better accomplished. And I think Murder Type 6 is really kind of, there's been a few points throughout my writing, and that was one for sure.
Yeah, I loved Murder x6. How you approached it with involving the families and friends of the victims, like that was great. It was something that really the RCMP officer who wrote the book, I can't remember his name right offhand, but
yeah, I had both of them. And it was really important to make sure that they were all in on it. They all, it made it, I don't know, it just made it a better process. And it's almost like you're doing something for a reason. And I think it makes the writing better. It makes the story better. It makes the outcome better. And so when you have an all-around experience like that, it means, wow, this is like an achievement that's more than anything I've done before. And I've had a few of them throughout my time. It's not just that one, but that one sticks out because it's the most recent one.
Let's give the radio show a plug. How can people find and listen to it?
The House of Mysteries on a few radio stations. There's it down in LA, and it's down in Salt Lake and Phoenix plays it still, and so does Seattle. So the best way to do it is to go to houseofmysteryradio.com or alanrwarren.com. It takes you to the same place. It's on 5 days a week, and it covers anything that's mysterious.
Okay, yeah.
So it really covered paranormal, true crime, unsolved mysteries, sort of that sort of aspect. And it's grown now. I do a lot of inside writing. So I talk to a lot of writers that cover different genres of writing. So fiction and nonfiction. It's all of it. It can be LGBTQ. It can be anything. And I'm kind of it's grown a lot as a show. It's not just true crime anymore. So I have different parts, and we'll see where it goes.
You have a few books that you'd like to give away. How can listeners participate in the giveaway, and who's eligible?
Well, I'd like to, with the with the new series, The Killer Queens, either one of them. Now, Butcher of Hanover, you've done an intro for us, which was great. And so anybody listening to your show that wants a free Kindle of the book, just send their email to radiocub@gmail.com, and that's with two B's. And they get a free Kindle. I think the first 24. Now you have to be an American. Now that's not anti-Canadian. It's just for some reason Canada doesn't allow us to give away ebooks.
Yeah, which is nonsense. I don't understand it. I would have given away a bunch of my books had I had access to do that.
It makes no sense to me, and you can't do it through Amazon or Apple or anybody. I tried, and they just don't allow it. None of the companies do. So it must be a legal thing. But in Canada, I'll give the first 12 that email me with a Canadian address a paperback of the book. How's that? And then
that sounds fantastic.
And Kindle to the Americans, and that's the best I can do. My hands are tied.
Okay. So the first 24 Americans to email Radio Cub, that's Cub with 2 B's, at gmail.com, will receive a Kindle copy of your book, Butcher of Hanover. And the first 12 Canadians to email radiocub@gmail.com and give their Canadian mailing address will get paperback copies.
Exactly. And that's, so just go for it. Yeah. So the first ones we receive, and you got the information there, we'll send out the copy, and hopefully if you like it, give a review. If you don't, just don't give a review. No, the feedback's always good. I always like to hear from people, whether it's good or bad, because hopefully that'll make a better book the next time I write.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on Dark Poutine, Alan. We hope to have you back again.
I'm always around. Anytime.
Okay. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks.
Thoughts on Alan's interview, Matthew?
Well, the beginning, Alan says his dogs think he's a celebrity.
Yes.
My dog is a celebrity.
It's true.
And knows it. So I'm living my celebrity life vicariously through Steve.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with everything that he's saying, really. I think we started talking about it at the beginning.
Yep.
It's Germany actually. It's fascinating how things can change. Germany in the 20s, like he was talking, that it was really becoming liberal. If you've seen the movie Cabaret and stuff like that, much more open. And then when the Nazis came in, just completely turned. And, it was Holocaust Remembrance Day this week. And you saw something that I'd shared that, and not a lot of people know this, when the camps were liberated, gays were still put back in jail.
Yeah, depending on the country. Yeah.
Horrible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Horrible. But yeah, it's the case, and people love. It still happens, right? But more so back then, but still now.
Yep. I mentioned the Andrew Cunanan case.
Yeah, it's as soon as the gay thing, it's like, oh, look at those gays, right?
Yeah.
Look at evil. Like, if you look back in movies as well, lesbians always murderers.
Interesting. Right? What movies, for example, are you thinking about?
I can't think of any.
Yeah, see? There you go.
Monster.
Well, that's a story about a serial killer, though.
Charlize Theron was one.
Yes, but that's a story about a serial killer. There's a bunch of other ones.
Don't ask me that. I now have to look it up. I just know it's a fact.
Okay.
Killer lesbians.
Killer lesbians.
From outer space.
Well, yeah, it's like
or gays are like either killers or they're dying of the AIDS or in it. And as soon as there's like a gay or a lesbian or a transgender theme, there's all this like society. It somehow becomes worse because of who they like to sleep with or who they are. Right?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
It is.
He's he's much more well spoken than me about this.
Alan's a great guy.
He seems like a really nice guy.
And we'll have him back on the show again, I'm sure.
Do you think his dogs are like my dog?
Odie,
his
sort of medium-sized dog, and Steve would probably just run around and play.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and but Alan also has a Chihuahua who's a little tiny little.
Oh, Steve gets along with the.
Oh, really?
There's a guy from Mexico lives in my building, and he has 4 Chihuahuas.
Oh my gosh!
And they come in and sort of circle Steve, and he lets them do their thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
As there are more than 24 murders in this case, we are unable to give as much attention to the victims, as we mentioned previously, as we like typically. So with a single episode, each victim is reduced to just the name of a person who was murdered on a list, and with very little detail about who they were, of their family, their life, essentially. I feel like it dehumanizes them. And this is a problem that seems to repeat itself every time I approach crimes with multiple victims. Its persistence is giving me cause to rethink the way I cover such cases, as they seem to beg for a series of episodes to properly cover them. As there are many cases I've been avoiding for this reason, perhaps it's time to start approaching some larger cases by having multiple parts. As I've noticed with other multi-part cases, though, that I've covered, it seems the first episode gets the most attention, and listener interest seems to wane after that. So, do you think we should do this? Should we have more multiple part episodes, or should we just sort of gloss over human beings? I really struggle with it.
Well, I like a good 2-parter, but I think what you have to do is sort of like remember the old episodes of Dallas where there'd be a crescendo and like, oh my God, what's going to happen in the next episode?
Right. Who shot JR?
Yeah, because people have low attention spans. We all do. I'm not saying our listeners, everybody does. So you have to like, if we did it, you kind of have to do the, who shot JR?
Cliffhanger.
The cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But, I think with the older ones anyway, the tides of history wipe away so much of
they really do
those details anyway. That you could talk about history. You could talk about go back to the 1700s and mass slaughters of whoever, and it's like you're never gonna. And it becomes what people do to people as opposed to who did what to whom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned a real point in time in history, and I'm thinking like Elizabeth Bathory and Gilles de Rais and people like that who killed possibly hundreds of people. And all of those people were essentially to feed their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like an episode becomes about the killer and what they did rather than about what they did to a human being. Like you said,
Yeah, when it's old, because people hold on to the stories and the focus is on the killer. When we do more contemporary crimes,
yeah,
I think we do a really good job because there's still living relatives and it's now, you know what I mean? And you want to pay respect. I think you can, with these historical ones, you can pay a general respect to people, to victims.
Yeah, well, that's why I list the victims.
Yeah, you can a general respect, but you're not going to find any information about any of those people, are you?
No, not really.
And that's the sad bit. The sad bit is, which one was the next great doctor that never had a chance, or you know what I mean?
Or, one of them is a pianist. Could he have written an amazing symphony or something like that? Yeah. So, I just struggle with that. Like, and you mentioned contemporary cases, and I think right away comes to mind Robert Pickton. 49 women. How do I approach that? How do I do that in a way that brings some sort of attention to those people? Do I just cover one of the women? I mean,
I think in your heart you'd want to do 49 episodes.
Yeah,
to make sure you honor each one of them.
That's the problem that I have with it.
Yeah,
and I think people are like, Mike's banging on about that.
It's a good thing that you're a sensitive guy, though.
Yeah, I guess.
And that you care about this stuff, right?
I really do.
Because so many podcasts out there are it's like you don't even, the victims are sort of this secondary thing, right?
I don't want to say that we're a better podcast. I never want to say that.
I'm not saying we're better.
We're different.
We're different, but and the reason why I do the show with you is because I like the difference that you do. You know, yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and we are better than some podcasts.
I have to think about how to approach
and
those
some
cases.
podcasts are better than us.
It's true.
But that's okay.
Just 99% of the podcasts are better than us. All right. Let's move on to voicemails. That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week. All righty, let's listen to the first one.
Hello, Mike and Matt. My name is Robert from Montreal, Quebec. I'd like to thank you for the MK Ultra episodes. That's a dark chapter of Quebec that even here is rarely spoken about. It also is nice to learn about dark chapters from some of my old customers, namely the Ritz-Carlton on Sherbrooke and the Allen Memorial itself, where I heard so many stories about the building being haunted that even if I don't believe in ghosts, I had the heebie-jeebies every time I was alone anywhere in the building. If I had a recommendation for a future episode, I'd suggest Duplessis Orphans, Les Orphelins de Duplessis, where 20,000 orphans were wrongly classified by the Quebec government and the Catholic Church as mentally ill to receive additional subsidies from the federal government in the 30s and 40s. So in the end, I'd recommend maple syrup in your toque. At least it smells better than, well, poop. Ciao.
Well, so there you go. And I love that Quebecois accent. It's that always like I said to you earlier, I would like to move to a place where I had an interesting accent.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having a Quebecois accent. I would like that.
Yeah, it's a damn fine accent.
It seems rather, it's Canadian. It's still Canadian, but it seems a little more exotic. In a way,
a lot fancier.
Yeah, there's a fanciness to it because you know that.
I love by the way, I love the word heebie-jeebies.
Heebie-jeebies.
yeah. That would so many stories does give you the heebie-jeebies.
And that story he mentioned about orphans, 20,000 of them being misclassified as mentally ill, so the Catholic Church could steal money from Canada.
Any surprises? No.
Well, and you know, Yeah, I don't want to get into
It's
religion.
fun. I didn't.
Yeah, good.
I got into greed.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Let's listen to the next voicemail. This one could be an interesting one, too. They all are.
Hi, guys. It's Julia from Alberta, and I just wanted to say thank you for all the content you've been putting out. The podcast has been my number one source of entertainment through the past semester, and I'm sure it's going to be the next semester, too. So thank you for what you do. And also, thank you especially for being so respectful to victims and survivors, because I find it's pretty hard to find podcasts or YouTube channels who actually do that properly. So I love you.
Wow.
We love you too.
That's very nice. Yes,
See,
we love you
exactly
too.
what I was saying.
What?
About the victims.
Yeah. People do appreciate it, I think. And I can't do it any other way, because I've listened to some podcasts where it's like, yeah, but what about that person that got murdered?
I know.
You know, it's just like, and then he did this, and then he did that.
It becomes death porn.
It's exactly what it is. It's like, remember rotten.com, that website? I don't know if it even exists anymore.
No.
But what it was essentially a gore site that you would go to, and there were just pictures and videos of people dying, and it's not a good thing. It is not my type of thing. But yes, thank you so much, and good on you for getting an education. She says she's made it through one semester thanks to listening to us, and I always think that after someone has gotten an education, it's like, oh wow, Mike's really dumb. He should probably stop doing that.
And you would be right.
Well, and listen, you really think I'm dumb?
Of course I don't.
And here's another voicemail.
Hey, Mike and Matt, Katie from Brandon, Manitoba here. I just wanted to say that I love your podcast. I work in ag equipment sales, so the vast majority of my time is spent driving. There have been countless times where your podcast has saved me from a lot of boredom. I especially enjoyed the Tim McLean episode, as it occurred not far from my hometown. I can still remember hearing about it on the radio when I was on my way home from school. It was especially devastating for a few of my friends as they knew Tim. Also, as for Matthew's hatred of Nanaimo bars, I'm right there with you, bud. There's just something about the custard chocolate coconut mix that I just can't stomach. Butter tarts are definitely the superior dainty. Thanks, guys. Take a shit in your hat and have a great day.
Well, we're glad that whilst you're driving around Manitoba selling agricultural equipment, maybe other provinces too, that you can listen to us and we'll entertain you. As far as Nanaimo bars go, they're not my absolute favorite. They're just not. I mean, they are a treat that I enjoy, but they're not my favorite.
They're too sweet.
Yeah, I like eating treats that are so sweet my teeth feel like they're going to fall out.
The Nanaimo bars do that, don't they?
They do that.
There's literally, you can feel the trip to the dentist coming when you eat them.
Mm-hmm. There weren't a lot of Nanaimo bars or butter tarts growing up for me.
Really?
We had mincemeat tarts, which are interesting. They're a little...
Oh, it's so funny. We had butter tarts, and my grandparents' last name was Buttery.
Oh yeah,
so we always called them buttery tarts.
Buttery tarts.
But they were huge in our family.
Yeah, we didn't have that kind of thing growing up. I don't recall. The big dessert for us was apple pie. You know, just grandma's apple pie, or
Ours was pumpkin pie.
My grandmother made a lot of ginger snap cookies. A lot. So I used to stop in with my friends on the way home from school, because my grandmother's house was halfway between home and school. Like, my school was exactly 1 kilometer away from my house, straight on a street. So it took probably like 15 minutes to walk. And we would just stop at my grandmother's house and fuel up.
Ginger snaps.
Fuel up on ginger snaps and root beer.
Whenever my mother lost her temper with my brother and I, her name's Ginger, we'd yell, "Ginger snaps!" and then run.
Oh, cruel bastards. And let's listen to one more.
Hi, this is Laurel from Oregon. I just love your show. I fell a little behind on episodes while traveling recently, so I just got to your Remembrance Day episode. As I mentioned, I'm an American, but I do have a connection to Canadian Remembrance Day. My grandfather and his family moved to Canada when he was a child. I have a great photo of him as a teenager harvesting wheat on the Alberta prairie. My other prized photo of him is in his Canadian Expeditionary Force uniform. He served as a sapper during World War I. As I'm sure you know, sappers dug tunnels on the front, and it was one of the more dangerous assignments. He made it through the war safely and then caught the 1918 flu while in England. Fortunately, he recovered and made it home, as otherwise he never would have met my grandmother and raised 10 children, including my mother. So keep up the good work, and as an honorary Canadian, I feel free to say shit in your hat. Bye.
You can say shit in your hat no matter where you're from.
But you can especially say it if you're
Yeah,
honorary
that's it.
Canadian.
Thank you. Yes, thank you to your grandfather for his service. And thank you for the nice voicemail. And yeah, I love Oregon. I think I want to travel again. I especially like places like Seaside and
That's where Nike is headquartered, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I really do like, I love the West Coast. I just love the West Coast and driving down Highway 1.
I haven't seen a lot of it.
Oh,
I've only been here for 6 years, right?
Yeah.
And 2 of those has been COVID times where we can't go over the border.
Yeah.
I've been to Seattle a few times, which I really like.
Sure.
But I haven't been to Oregon or anywhere else.
So take the train from Vancouver to Portland. There is a train.
Okay.
And you take the train, I think it's the Cascades line. I can't remember which, but it's a great ride and takes you through some beautiful vistas and that kind of stuff. In Portland, rent a car.
Right.
And drive down the number 1 highway to California along the coast and make sure that you stop at San Simeon, which is where William Randolph Hearst's castle is.
Okay.
Hearst Castle is a fantastic
The Hearst
sort
Castle.
of side trip. So
Okay.
yeah, it's great.
I'll
I
check
love it.
that out.
Yeah, you got to see more of the West Coast because it is beautiful. And that's it for voicemails. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. It is now time for our Patreon shout-outs for the week. I'm looking forward to this. First up, we have Wendy Rashid. And I don't know where Wendy's from.
Hello, Wendy Rashid.
I don't know where Wendy's from.
I know, but I'm not going to say.
Yeah, but she is a Yumberyarder.
She's a Yumberyarder.
Yes.
She's fabulous.
So
I'm gonna put Wendy in South Beach, Miami.
South Beach, Miami.
Which I think she'll appreciate.
There you go. I like Miami. I was watching some architectural shows about Miami the other day. I'm big into architecture again.
You know what? Did you know I used to have a place down there?
No.
In the Portofino Yacht Club on Alton. So the south end of South Beach, just right near Government Cut, if anyone knows South Beach at all. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It used to be fun.
So what does Wendy do there in South Beach?
She directs the ships that go through the Government Cut.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There you go.
So it's called Government Cut because they actually cut through the land to make so cruise ships and other ships could go through. So she's a flagger. She has flags to make sure that it doesn't hit because there's a restaurant called it's a steak restaurant, but the ships go like right beside it, and she makes sure that it doesn't they don't smash into the restaurant.
Oh well, you wouldn't want to smash into a steak. Well, I would actually not mind smashing into a steak restaurant.
It's called like Szynski's or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never been to Miami, I don't think. No, maybe I was once.
Take me to Miami.
Next, we have Paul Cavan or Cavan. Where is Paul from, Matthew?
Soho.
London,
the London one.
Oh, the London one, not the New York one.
No.
And what is Soho and London like? I don't really know anything about London.
Oh, really?
Other than it is the place
Soho,
where the Queen lived.
West End, so lots of theatres.
Okay.
The John Gielgud Theatre, etc.
Oh, John Gielgud.
Yeah. It used to be sort of the gay village as well, but that's kind of moved just oddly, right across the gay village. A lot of the gay parts of London moved to just across the street from MI5.
Okay.
Yeah. And do you know why it's called Soho?
It's because they're all in love with...
Yeah, with the spies. Do you know why it's called Soho?
No.
Do you know why New York Soho is called Soho?
No.
So in New York, it's south of Houston.
Okay.
Right, so it's below Houston Street. In London, that used to be a hunting ground, and Soho was a hunting call, and that's why it's called Soho.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so he's from Soho, London.
Nice. What does he do there?
He's a hunter.
I don't think there's hunting in Soho anymore.
No, there's hunting of another kind.
Moving forward, that's called cruising, Matthew.
Yes.
Moving forward from Lacey, Washington, we have May Danger.
May Danger.
May Danger.
I love the name.
Who's calling? It's May Danger.
May Danger.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I wanted to change my name to Max Metropolis.
Oh, dear. Wow. Max Metropolis. That's a good name.
So the Max is from Maximilian, which was the evil robot in that movie where the little things come out.
Yeah.
And
the black hole.
Yeah. And Metropolis, a girl that I knew, she's Greek. It's different, Metropolis, different spelling.
Yeah.
But I'd only heard it. And I thought her last name was Metropolis. I thought Max Metropolis would be
Max
cool.
Metropolis.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be named Xavier.
Xavier.
Something, the only name I can think of that starts with an X.
I know an Xavier.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, but my name is not Xavier.
No, it's Mike.
Yeah.
Mike.
Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael.
Exactly. And what does May Danger do there in Lacey, Washington?
I don't know, but it's dangerous because she doesn't May danger. She definitely dangerous.
Yeah, she's not May. Oh no. So it's so dangerous we can't talk about it.
This is the case.
Yeah. Next we have Carol Soares, and Carol is from Toronto, Ontario.
Hello, Carol.
Yeah. And what does Carol do there in Toronto?
What does she do in Toronto?
Yeah, Toronto.
Toronto. I think she is a TTC driver.
Oh, there you go.
The Red Rocket.
The Red Rocket.
Yeah.
Is that the trolley?
Yeah, they call it the Red Rocket.
Oh, cool.
But the one she drives is hot pink.
Hot pink trolley.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. With like little blue flames on the side.
Either that or she's like a high-powered lawyer.
It's one of the two.
Yeah.
It has to be. Next, we have Ellie Glover, and I don't know where Ellie is from.
You don't know where Ellie's from?
No, I don't.
Where was Danny Glover born?
I don't know.
She's from there.
Oh, is she Danny Glover's relative?
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go. She doesn't want to say how she's related, though.
No, just generally, there's a general relation there.
Okay, and what does Ellie do wherever Danny Glover is from? Because we didn't even say where she's from.
What do you call a beekeeper?
Oh my gosh, I used to know this.
An AV.
They have apiaries, so a bee.
She's an apiarist.
I guess so. I'm sure that there's a better name for it. But...
Sugar.
Exactly.
Oh, honey, honey.
Well, thank you very much, Ellie.
Thank you.
Next, we have Laurel Christic, and I don't know where Laurel is from. Laurel is probably from somewhere far away, I think.
Christic?
Mm-hmm.
So this is how my mind works.
Okay.
I went Christic.
Yep.
Crystals.
Yes.
Superman's palace.
Oh.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is how my mind works. I've had too much caffeine.
Superman's palace.
Yeah, you know the one, the Crystal Palace.
Yes, I know.
So that's where she's from.
I used to go to the Crystal Ball as an arcade in Nova Scotia at the mall. Yeah, the Crystal Ball. And then I would come home smelling like cigarette smoke and tell Mom that it was not me smoking, it was the other people at the Crystal Ball.
Was that the truth?
No, it was me smoking. I usually had a pack of cigarettes down the front of my pants hiding.
Wow.
Yeah, I was not a good kid.
You were a bad child.
I was a bad child.
The more I hear. But anyway, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Laurel. What does Laurel do there at Superman's palace?
There's a lot of crystal cleaning that needs to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say she probably has to sweep up.
She has a squeegee.
There you go. Just run around. That's a lot of squeegeeing. Next, we have from Rock Spring, Georgia, Jennifer Eldridge. Jennifer, thank you so much. What does Jennifer do there in Rock Spring, Georgia?
She's a musician.
Oh, what does she music?
She's a, what do you call that? Guitar.
Oh, what do you call that?
Six string.
Oh, 6-string. Okay.
Yeah.
Can she play anything else? Is it just like acoustic or rock or what is it, like electric?
You know the Georgia sound?
I do.
A lot of like really cool bands. She's one of those.
Sort of that kind of, yeah.
One of those. She was a session player.
Oh, nice.
For years. Then she formed her own band.
Nice.
Called the Rock Spring Eternals.
Edmund Rocks. Wow, that is actually quite an interesting and good name for a band. I'm sure there is one.
I just made that up.
Well, and they'll sue us for saying that she's in the band.
No,
Who cares?
No, they won't, because she's such a good guitarist.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer.
That they would be lucky to have her in their band.
There you go. Let's move on to PayPal.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, we have a couple of donut money donors this week. And first up is our friend Melissa Antaya. She's back again. She says, "Hey, Mike and Matthew, Melissa again. I got caught up and heard episode 203 with my donut money shout out. So she thought she'd do it again. Sending love from Kitchener, Ontario, dreaming about my Salvador Dali Museum in Florida, lol. I started listening from episode 1 back in October while painting my basement, as I could only sing along to so many 90s playlists to get through my daunting tasks. So glad that I found the podcast. It's awesome. And if I have a record for listening to all 203 episodes in 14 weeks, #winning. Can't wait for more episodes. They keep getting better and better, and I will now always picture Southern Ontario as an elephant. Thank you, Matthew. Elephants are my favorite.
Mine too.
Glad you also share my hate for Uggs and Reba McEntire. Much love. Your book is fabulous too, Mike. P.S. Go shit in your hat.
Nice. Go shit in your Uggs.
Yeah, so we know that she's from Florida, although she's from Kitchener, and she works at the Salvador Dali Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting.
Kitchener.
So thank you again, Melissa. That is awesome.
I love that she's listening to 90s playlists though.
Well, yeah.
But there's like that you can dive into like different 90s playlists, which are fun, right? So you can do like, rock or pop 90s, or you can do sort of dance or trance, or
I like the experimental and sort of industrial stuff from the 90s.
Einsters and the Neubauten.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of late 80s, though, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, no, they were into the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. So
collapsing new buildings.
Front 242 and
oh yeah, I remember 242.
Yeah. I love that stuff. So next up we have Karthik Dayala, and Karthik, I don't know where he's from. But let's take a wild guess, Matthew. Where do you think this guy is from?
Southall, London.
Okay.
He sounds like the name Indian, I think, probably.
It could be, yep.
As you know, my husband is half Indian.
Yes.
And we live near Southall with a big Indian community. So I'm going to say he lives in Southall.
And what does he do there in Southall? I'm curious.
He takes the tube into London every day.
Okay. As with many.
Yeah. And he runs an advertising agency.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
There you go. So
yeah, he is Don Draper of London.
Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot to us if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my book, Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, is available to order via a link on the Dark Poutine website. And speaking of our website, please check out darkpoutine.com for show notes and other cool stuff. Please take the time to give Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. Don't forget, If you're American or a Canadian, you can get one of Alan's books. Go back and listen again to what you have to do in Alan's interview.
Mm-hmm.
Until we return, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Pod a bad apple.
Pod a bad apple. Bye, folks.
Bye.